Welcome back to the Smooth Brain Society. I am Sahir, and with me is Olivia.
Hello.
And we're doing this before the actual intro playing today because we're going to change things up for this episode. We have senior lecturer in Māori and Indigenous Psychology, Dr. Neha, with us. And as per request, we're going to start off with a whakatoki, which is a Māori proverb or saying, words of wisdom, and with a Waiata right after that. And then I will introduce Dr. Neha, and she'll kind of explain a little bit about them to us. So first off with the whakatoki, Ehara taku toa I te toa takitahi, Henare Te Owai taki mano, which stands for success is not the work of one, but the work of many. And now the Waiata. Okay, great. Now, just quickly before Dr. Neha starts, I'll introduce her a little bit further. Dr. Neha is a senior lecturer and researcher in Māori and Indigenous Psychology at Victoria University of Wellington. She completed her PhD at the University of Otago in the role of culture and autobiographical memory, and to what extent these factors link to Māori children's school readiness and well-being. And welcome to the podcast, Dr. Neha.
Tēnā kōrua Sahir, rau ko Olivia. Ka rukuruku te rangi tā waia ona pūrehu. Ko hukarangi te maunga, ko waipu te awa, ko te rangi tā waia te tangata. Ko tia Neha hau, he pūkinga matua I te kura mātai hinengaro, kei roa I te wharewānanga o Victoria. Ka huri ahau I te reo tuarua. Greetings, Sahir and Olivia. Nice to meet you both again.
Welcome.
As if we haven't been speaking for the past 20 minutes.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Tia, and as Sahir eloquently said, I come from Otago, which is the southern part of New Zealand, and now here in the capital, and it's a big city here in Wellington, and I've been here for 6 years as a Māori and Indigenous lecturer in psychology. And here I just want to just preface here with what Sahir and Olivia have brought together for today's talk or podcast was at the beginning with the whakatoki, which is looks at the work of one person is made also greater with the work of a whole village, or something to that extent. There's a phrase that goes with that. So you're not in this game alone, but with a collective focus here that, the job's going to get done and some, because the work at hand, be it research or in the community, is going to be something that I always say about in my classes, as long as whatever the phrase is, it benefits the community. So a big shout out to all the folks that may tune into today's podcast from Kenya, Romania, the UK, the USA or North America, India, Australia, Germany, Brazil, Finland, Estonia, and our good homegrown Aotearoa, New Zealand. And apologies if I missed out on some other countries.
We'll see them come up in the future. We can shout them out.
So, yes, thank you folks for listening to our kōrero or our podcast chats. So the whakatoki is what Sahir alluded to, was talking about bringing in that collective focus and looking at who will lead, who will be the people that will be the successors in regards to research, regards to community, regards to the applications of looking at what's important, namely psychology and life science for us, and how it's going to be received at the other end with the communities that we serve. For today's talk, I work a lot with Whānau or Māori and Indigenous people here in New Zealand. And essentially, a lot of the work there comes from the ground up. And so, meaning that, I can't come in and parachute in and say, right, this is what we're going to do because I'm going to get shouted out in more ways than one. And so a lot of the work comes from what's happening at the time in the community. So it could be around the areas of looking at environmental issues. It could be looking at the areas of development, housing development, looking at the psychological construction around learning and behaviour, health, looking at the functions or the genetical factors of brain conditions, e.g. Huntington's is one example that comes to mind. But essentially, it's a means of like really making those connections, and I mean sincerely and authentically with people, and namely with Māori. And if you folks are from other folks are from Indigenous communities, you might get what I'm alluding to here. And so I guess I'll just like stop there for a wee while because I suspect that people will want to know what followed the whakatauki was a Waiata or a song. Generally speaking, the song is normally in tandem with the whakatauki. And the Waiata, called Aowera, has been composed by my great-granduncle, Henare Te Owai, and he's from the east coast of the North Island. And here, that song looks at one of our great leaders had passed. His name was Pine Tamahere, sorry. And there, because my karaua or my granduncle couldn't attend the funeral, he wrote the song Aowera. Who will lead? Who will take our community to the next level of like making sure that is a benefit for the community and for collective health, which was a lovely whakatauki that you chose today, you both. Kia ora kōrua.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your background here. I'm very curious what you were like as a young person. Were you always interested in psychology or Indigenous psychology and helping the community?
Kia ora, Olivia. As a child, I was very inquisitive. I was always the person that had the hand up in the back of the class on the mat, to the point of when I was 6, my primary teacher at the time had been talking about the Maori stories. And the Maori stories, for those of you that aren't familiar with these stories, are traditional stories about one of our demigods or deities. And he had a lot of adventures throughout his time on this earth or in New Zealand. And one of them was how he caught the sun to slow down the sun so that we could have the time between night and day. My teacher, bless her cotton socks at the time, had called Maui Maui. So little Tia at that time put her hand up and said, Mrs. Duffy, it's not Maui, my mum says Maui. So what took place from that transaction back then, my teacher could have, basically, she could have chastised me back then and told me to keep quiet. Instead, she rang my mum, and my mum was very receptive to the phone call, and mum said, yes, Maui his name is Maui. And so my primary teacher, had then invited mum to come in to teach the Te Reo Māori, or the Māori language, in the class with the stories and with the Waiata that you heard, and also things that are really relevant, culturally relevant to our community. So why I mentioned that story was I was always, as I said, the person that put my hands up as a child, wanting to know, the kid that asks, why is the sky blue, or why is the grass green, and not necessarily satisfied with the actual answer at times. So that took me through to high school, where I learnt a lot about, my parents were native fluent speakers in my culture and in Te Reo Māori. So I had a really good background, despite being the only Māori family that lived in our community in Dunedin for 26 years. That said, back then we had really good relations with our folks, and still do, from this community called Broad Bay in Dunedin. And then I went to high school, and there that was an all-girls school that was specifically buttressed around culture, my culture. And I learnt more in more regards about my Waiata and about performance, about the aspects of living with young women, living in a situation that, in a city that was far away from where I came from, and I was the only person from the Southern District at the time for 5 years. And then from there I went to university to do 2 degrees, one in teaching and prior to that one in mathematics.
Oh, I didn't know you did mathematics.
Yeah, to master's degree level.
Wow.
And yes, and then I taught in the area for quite some time at a high school level, and then moved through to working with children with special needs or learning disabilities, and became a principal thereafter. At that time, when I was a principal of a school, I worked alongside with a lot of educational psychologists. I was always quite curious, again, here comes that curiosity coming back in again, about just the role of the psychologists at that time and how much impact or landing they had with the child, the classroom environment, the other moving parts, namely like the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, the social workers, of course the whānau, the teacher aide, the classroom teachers, of how they matched it all together to make a report which would then provide some ongoing learning and funding for the child, and moving through to how those programs would be reviewed over time up until the child was 18. So it always intrigued me, the psychologist's role, as to, because a lot of the times they were inundated with a high caseload and they might see the child once every 3 months. So it's not much. It's pretty much a brief glimpse of seeing somebody in their natural context. So at that time, I was in education. I moved sideways to psychology in 1997 because it was quite easy at that time to become an armchair critic and look at our psychologists out in the community or in the schools and go, well, we'll get to see these people maybe 3 times a year. And so for me, it was like, well, instead of being an armchair critic, let's check out the psychology. And so since then, I've done my undergraduate degree in psychology and honours through to masters at Canterbury University. And then, as you mentioned, I had completed my PhD at Otago. And in between, still teaching at the same time. So psychology, the interest in psychology was more born out of my work in the education system and looking at it more out of interest and what perhaps I could offer to the discipline in itself. And to be frank, coming here to the university here to become a faculty member was, dare I say it, an accident. I hadn't thought of becoming a lecturer. I was thinking of going back and doing more work out in the community. But it just so happened that, we had some lovely people from the school, Professor Garth Fletcher and Professor Colleen Ward. These people basically followed me up through to the time when I submitted my PhD and got it concurred. And they asked the first time, and I said at the time, no. And then a year later, when I'd actually finished the PhD, they had got word of it and asked me again. I said, yes, my mum's well, and I'm ready. So here I am. Big long story, isn't it?
Well, it's a great story, though. I did not know the first half. All I went by is your information on the website, which is not a lot.
There's a lot more to you, Tia.
That's why we asked the question to begin with.
Right.
So can we get into your work then
Sure.
itself?
Including your PhD thesis?
Okay.
Would you want to relive your PhD thesis is the question.
I'll tell you something, so Head and Olivia, I'll tell you something, folks out there in radio land or podcast land. I'll put it in my context. When I did my PhD, I called it my husband. And, it was like a marriage.
Ups and downs.
Indeed, yes, indeed. And so when I finally finished it, it was like, that's the best divorce I've ever had, because it was just done and dusted, out the door, ready to be reviewed and examined, and that was that. And I had no emotions after that, from that divorce. So, yeah, all jokes aside, a year before I started the PhD, the community had seen me out and about working with in schools, and had asked me, what are you doing? I went, working, apart from, stating the obvious. And they said, hey, you wanting to do that PhD? I went, no. And they said, think you should. And I went, oh, it sounds like hard work, right? And then somebody else planted the seed again. And then somebody else's, like that whole village thing I was telling you at the beginning. Yeah, it was a big hui, or gathering, or meeting of up to 80 people that had asked that I considered doing a PhD. And I thought, okay, I've been told. And I said, so what's going to be the topic? And they said, well, we want it to be strengths-based. I went, yeah, that's a given. We want it to be community-driven. I went, yeah. We want to be part of every phase of the PhD, going from the questions, going from the ethics, going from the literature used, looking at the methods section itself, looking at flexibility within the methods section, and the data, how that would be collected, how it would be stored, and essentially how it would be interpreted. And, what some of the questions that were asked was around the data was, what if the data's not that great? How are you going to report it? I said, let's hope that we get some good results, because I really didn't know at the time, right? But they were asking some real questions, and saying, who owns this research? And I went, well, since I'm part of it, the host university is going to be allowing me to work in a space where I can do this. They went, yeah, who owns the research? And I went, the research belongs to the Whānau and to the university. What about the data? So all these things were coming up before I even got down to the why about the research questions. And at the time, we were, myself and the 80 people that were at the hui, they were interested on looking at how our kids move into the school system or transition into the school system. And are their gifts or are their strengths being picked up upon first contact at school or not? And if so, how can we look at unpacking that so people can be more attuned or more receptive or more understandable as to little Johnny has a really good memory. Is the memory around stories? Let's enhance that story memory, because that's going to work some really good processes towards story comprehension further down the track for little Johnny, as an example. Or does little Katie like letters? Or does she like sounds? Does she like Waiata? Can we use sounds and Waiata in tandem to absolutely enhance her letter identification, letter sounds, through to word formulations, through to print, through to still capturing oral stories that were traditionally, culturally imbued into the wee ones' repertoire memories and story memory skills.
Mm-hmm. So that's like the strength-based approach?
Pretty much, yes, pretty much, Olivia. And it was looking at somewhere in the mix we may find what needs may be unearthed as well. And those could be something that could also be reported to look at what the ministries could do, well, Ministry of Education here, and the science advisor to the Prime Minister as well had been advised with this research as well. So in regards to transitions for Māori children and their whānau to schools, and what are some of the things that can be tapped into or used, not only at a policy level but at the school face or the coal face in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, Saheed, one way of capturing that was through the means of autobiographical memory, through one strategy that's used in this area called reminiscing. And it's where the parent or the adult talks with the child and talks about past events that's meaningful for that child. Be it, say, for example...
So that is what autobiographical memory is, right?
Yes, it is. It's one form of memory because there's lots of other forms of memory. This one is basically tracking about what you can remember and how that in turn links to your identity, how it may then link to your relationships, how it then may link to your learning, moral development, all those things that fit into the life trajectory of people or a child through to adulthood. And so that was one way of capturing it. And I did that under the supervision of Professor Elaine Rees and Associate Professor Melia Taumoe-Peo, who's going to be joining us here next trimester. And Professor Elaine Rees is based at Otago University. So with their careful and well-considered supervision, we managed to navigate between the university systems and the community systems and the school systems. And that way we were able to triangulate some of those, what we were finding from the home environment that may then map into what's happening in the school environment. So it's a nice smooth, what's the word? Streamless. Yes, segue and seamless means into the school as opposed to where it can be somewhat quite tough on the parents, especially if it's the first time they've had a child and then the child going to school. But if there's things that are happening from the home and into the school, no-brainer. You're going to get buy-in from, whānau. You're going to get buy-in from families. And, the school's going to really have a good insights to what's happening in the home. And this work was one way of capturing it, alongside with the nearly 1,500 assessments that I did with the wee ones. On the reminiscing, which meant that that would be recorded, it would be transcribed, it would be coded, and then it would be then put into some numerical form. I had 1,600 transcripts to unearth. Not only me, thankfully I had research assistants to unearth, to code, talking through with whānau about the meaning of this section of the work, through to then doing the data analysis, and then, like most research projects, then through to writing up the husband. We've done 6 publications since, but there's still more to do. So,
wow, from the same data?
What are some of the key takeaways from your publication so far?
Well, for that line of work, Saheed, it's looking at the relationships at all levels, and I mean, because they can be quite fragile at the best of times. If you, if you don't keep in contact with people, I still keep in contact with the whānau from this project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it's that part of keeping the lines of communication alive, and so that the next time I do the next wave of data, I'm going to have still that connection with whānau. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's laborious. It's a lot of legwork in the beginning. As I said, before I even started the PhD, there was a year preparation for the PhD before I got to get it on the books. And so here, the main part is about the relationships, those connections, engagement, looking at being able to ascertain right from the word go whether or not where the people are in regards to their cultural affiliation. So some people are starting out, some people are yet to start out. They know that they have a Māori and Indigenous background, but not quite sure of how it all links up to people that are really well-skilled, well-versed, well-immersed in tikanga me te reo Māori. So knowing that nuance is a psychological tool, even with our clinicians, of knowing how to move with the families that you work with or the community. some other aspects were the way how the parents talk with their wee ones, especially around cultural factors. Here, it basically like the parents would reminisce in a certain way. There's two types of reminiscing. And one is elaborations, and as it states is that the adult will pick up what the child has said about the experience and basically expand on it. So little Johnny might say, saw the red marae, red marae. And marae is a community hall where a lot of people come to congregate to share a lot of common things like anniversaries, funerals or tangi or celebrations. And the big upshot of a marae is to create community. And so little Johnny will be talking about red marae. Mum will say, or Dad will say, that's right, the red marae at University. So to expand on that exchange or that interaction, that's called an elaboration. And there's a whole lot of other units go into it too. However, when it was things around specifically cultural discussions or conversations, the reminiscing would move through to repetitions. And it was really significant, the data was showing it was really significant in that particular area where the parent or adult would go, okay, here at the big red marae, we went and we saw Nanny Pop, we saw our Auntie Joe, we saw, all these people, and there we had a big feed. And then the parent will say it again. And then the child will go, yes, that's right, we had a big feed, or big kai. But the repetitions was to ensure that a whole lot of cultural memory was being infused or reinforced into the child's memory. That was one of the big takeaways from this project, which also links with another Indigenous group from Haiti. They do similar techniques as well for memory storage, retrieval, and then expression. They use the repetition factors to basically really zone in on cultural aspects of what's expected behaviour, morals and beliefs, and how to act appropriately in different situations.
Mm-hmm.
Kia ora.
Sorry. So did the participants know that that's what they were being assessed on? And the second part of my question is, did a lot of parents feel self-conscious, like if they were doing things right to get their kids ready for school in the best way possible? Great
question, Olivia. That was all canvassed at the beginning, because there were parents that had some concerns. What if we're we're going to be observed about the way we talk with our child? What about if we're not doing the right things to get little Johnny to school, and what may be expected? And so for me it was how I had to explain it with parents at the time was, I'm not there to judge. The thing is, what's happening here is that, we want to see, what are some of the gold that can come out from this? Things like, what are some of the important things for you as a parent? Because it certainly has spin-offs, with your child. And in regards to how they connect to their world, how they connect to the school system, how they connect with their peers in class, how they manage their behaviour, how they understand that there's different ways of looking at things, different positions, cultures and the likes of. So yes. And I had to say to them at the same time, you are the child's first teacher. Yes, I am a teacher, formally trained as a teacher. I'm not a parent. So, and I said, and there's my disclaimer. So please don't, please don't throw me out with the bathwater.
Yeah. So what do you think are some practical skills that parents can take away?
Right. Let's put it this way. In this line of research, you don't need much money, but a lot of time and investment. So here, a shared book reading. And there's different styles of how adults talk with their children in regards to shared book reading. You'll get people that will go, what's this? What's this? Tell me what's this, which is more of at a descriptive level. And you'll get parents that will say, oh, again, expanding on the child's, like they may see the red marae, and they go, oh, that's right, the red marae is up the top of the Calburn Hill, near the university. And then you'll get parents that'll go, Okay. Looking at prediction. Looking at and saying to the child, what's going to happen next as the child turns the page? So that the child will go, the red marae is at the top of the hill, near the university. That's right. Oh, there's another marae. It's called the living pa. And so, it teaches the child what they call canonical formation, which means that you have a storyline, and then you have a climax, you have characters, you have predictions that are happening throughout the story, through to what's going to happen at the other end. Those sorts of things are really you can pitch them to children, at all ages. And it's a fun activity. And it may take you anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes. So those are some practical things that don't impede on the witch hour, as I call it, when parents are making tea around 5 o'clock. You can do something like it about 6:30, 6:45, where they can take little Katie and for the bedtime story. And you can do things like, again, talking with children about their day, before they get to the level where you may only get 1 or 2 monosyllabic words, like some of my own whānau when they were young adolescents. I go, how was your day? They go, good. What'd you do? Not much. So you're running out of words. But in this instance, with our younger kids through to when they hit the adolescence level, it's just talking about everyday things that are really important, and it doesn't cost anything, right? That's the upshot of it. And it's the essence of that the takeaway that you talked or that you asked about was the gold is in that relationship that's established between the adult and the child, or the adults and the child. Let's put it like this. It's not a rocket fuel science. It's just using a lot of well-invested time. And, if we're looking at citizenship, if we're looking at people that are well imbued in their culture, be it in Māori or other cultures, be it being a good learner, it's all investment at the early age, at the early years, through to where people are at now here at the university. Using a lot of talking, with children, young people, because using a lot of narratives, it also links to reading. Reading links to comprehension. That's a no-brainer. That links to learning for what we need in this industry. Same thing with mathematics, where I came from that area. Same thing. It's another literacy in itself. Being able to understand the language and then formulate it and put it into something that's coherent. Same thing. Same deal with the language that we use. It's a means of how do we connect, communicate, and converse. Kia ora.
That's great. I'll jump on that point then, because you just spoke about mathematics as a language. How was it like being one of the, I would say, few fluent Te Reo speakers, the only one in growing up, and the benefits of being bilingual?
Oh, great question. Thank you. How long you got? Sure. Oh, that's that. That is just that's a sweet spot. It's a really sweet spot, that one, because we do know now from the data and from many studies that language links to not only comprehension, but comprehension of all sorts, like, for example, with mathematics, yes, it is a language. So you're going to actually unpack it in a way that's going to be understandable to that audience. My father was very, very good at mathematics, and so as a child, he basically used to put me through my paces so that a lot of things my father has taught me from the ages of 4 to 8 is still imbued or stored to memory. And my grandmother, my dad's mum, she was also a person that went out into the forest, and there's a word called rongoa, and rongoa is like a medication, but in a means of it's not going to be detrimental to one's psychological outputs, or it's not going to cause any harm. It's like using more along the lines of what's natural in the environment, and to making, what's the term in English? Elixirs? elixirs, if the ill remedies, if need be, to help, like to make somebody feel better or get better, alongside with a whole lot of other rituals that are performed that my grandmother did. And so to link what my father used to do, he used to go through with me in an oral context about not only the timetables, but he would link it to in Te Reo Māori, which is my language, or our language here in New Zealand. Hey, it's official. And one of the 3 languages too. I'll get that plug in. And he would talk to me about its relevance, the numbers, and its relevance to the environment. And my grandmother, who did a lot of work in the environment, where she did a lot of collecting what we call rongoa, or medicinal herbs, that I would learn a lot of mathematics and how to do a lot of the concoctions, or a lot of the elixirs that we use to make somebody feel well. And so I got to learn a lot of some of the mathematics out in the environment, and then map it to the numbers, and then map it to human behaviour as a child. Does that help to answer some of your questions?
Yeah.
You want me to elaborate a bit more?
Wow, I find that so interesting because usually, at least for most children, it's just like, oh, here's the maths, do the maths. You don't understand it, we'll help you here. But like to put it in that context, in a practical context, and sort of in a cultural context as well. Wow.
At the Elf, like I'm sort of like a, what do they call me? They call me not a retiree, but like sometimes I feel like it, but someone that's been around the traps a long time. And so I still remember those things, Olivia, those teachings as a child. And I can go back to using some of those methods when I'm looking at, like if I'm trying to understand really quite a hard concept or construct in statistics. And I try and relate it. And when I finally find something that I can like align it to, I get the underpinnings of whatever that statistical analysis may be. So yes, so it's going from being a child, learning a lot of things that were almost rote learnt at the time, through into the natural environment, and then infused with a whole lot of things from my father and my grandmother that were really pertaining to numbers. So yes, hence my interest in numbers.
Mm-hmm. So does that speak to like the Māori worldview of sort of incorporating the environment as well?
Absolutely, without a doubt, because there's going to be different computations, for want of a term, or different like usages of the language that will help to express what some of those formulae might be. So if we're looking, for example, at the use of elixirs, and if we look at when we see like certain numbers of animals that appear, or certain numbers of a particular plant or herb that comes into bloom, we know it then maps to a certain time of the year, and that we can then track it to then when we can see when it's plentiful, when it's good to use, and then when it's good to give to people. There's a whole lot of mathematical factors that go into the mix as well. And that's all done, by the forecasting of the weather, forecasting of the seasons, forecasting of the numbers of availability of herbs or things to make those elixirs. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering, because this approach seems very bottom up. How does it fit into research or science, which has historically been a lot more, sitting in a lab-based or like Western-centric?
Right. Well, historically, it hasn't sat within a Western sphere, and because perhaps it's that as I sort of mentioned in today's talk, as around language, the use of language, how it's used, and how it might be perceived at the receiving end. So, you think our country's, it's really come a long way since the gone by days of where one group basically roughshod over another group. And what happened there, namely my people, it came at a demise of what was really a worldview that could be shared and used alongside with a whole lot of other things as well. So you talk about historically it wasn't flash. I mean, you can actually, for those of you that are listening to this podcast, there's a lot of work that's been documented around historically what's happened in New Zealand between the relations between Māori and the early settlers at the time, and through to it had a big impact. It had a big impact on education, health, a way of living, how one's knowledge system, all those things basically were subjugated for another means of learning. And it came at a cost. It came at a cost where people, psychological cost too, where a lot of people had been not given opportunities at the time of being able to advance in means or ways that were meaningful for their communities, and means of looking at how to prosper from some of the learnings that they had learnt from their whānau or extended families. So we have a historical factor that I can talk to at another time to bring us through to where we're at now, and thank you. My research in itself was the first of its kind, and was a big undertaking. Here I came, I'm Māori, and my PhD supervisors, I had one that was from North America and another one that was from Tonga and Britain. And here, trying to discuss things that are really of importance took a long time to consolidate. And once they were on board, because there was a lot of things that had to develop in this part of the process with the research. But I mean, most of it was sort of for me, it was second skin, because it was sort of when you can live a life that it's you can do it sort of like our natural. When you have to try and then communicate it with your supervisors, who are trying to come to grips with what you're saying, and it's really it takes time to unpack or bring them out so that they can see what I was doing, and maybe I needed more skills at the time to be able to really explain, what some of the concepts were in regards to working with whānau or Māori or Indigenous groups, and then looking at what were some of those things that were of importance. You're right, flipping it. I did, my research did flip it. But it was still that said, it took a long time to be able to talk with my supervisors to make them understand its value. Just because they come from another leaf in another worldview, and for me, it was my role to help communicate that, as well as in the written context, right? So once we found a nice midpoint there. Because one of my supervisors is from North America, a lot of my publications were then submitted to North American journals, and they met the test, and to British chapters as well. So the thing here that keeps reminding me about the project is that I need to bring home the publications so that the audience here can actually get to see what we did. So did it stand up against Western-based research? It sure did. Yeah, well, the documentation's here, the publications are there to show the proofs in the pudding. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
Because there's not a lot of Māori researchers today, even in psychology, so it's still an issue, right?
Yeah, you're true. Yes, Olivia. It is. I mean, let's think about psychology in its entirety. It's a young science, for starters. It's been housed historically from Germany through to North America and it's taken a pausicity there for a wee while before it's moved through to other parts of the world. So that said, yes, you're right, it's still yet to reach the shores or really make an impact here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I think here, one of the main things here that we can look at improving more Indigenous, Māori and Indigenous contributions is through the syllabus, through our curriculum, our psychology curriculum.
Are we talking about this at university or ground up?
Yeah, great question. I believe right across the because I'm actually on a team for the Ministry of Education as we speak in regards to flipping the syllabus and for psychology. And then our school is currently working on looking at the syllabus here, restructuring the syllabus so that there's going to be more exposure to Indigenous, bicultural, cultural factors in our school. And I think this is something that's happening across the board as well, in education. But I'm quite excited about how it'll pan out in psychology, specifically.
Mm-hmm. For the people that don't know, how does Indigenous psychology differ from general psychology?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I know a lot of people wouldn't even be exposed to it, like at an undergraduate level.
Well, there are points, common points. For example, if we're looking at a research context, we want to help the end user, generally speaking. We want to help whoever the target audience is. So I think we have, like that said, that's a common grounds to rest our, like we want to help people. We want to help, say for example, like what I've done with my research. I did help the Whānau or the families. They could see where their little Johnny or little Katie's were in the bigger scheme of things. So proud to see some of the things that were happening for them. I was just a recorder, more like the, secretary, So that said, oh my gosh, where am I going on this? Well, a lot of Indigenous psychology is rooted in, here in New Zealand, is based in qualitative work. A lot of Māori-centric or Indigenous-centric work here in New Zealand is housed in qualitative work. And so I guess I'm a bit of an anomaly because I generally work in an empirical context just because of my training and my exposure to psychology and my teachers. So that may be one difference, but the qualitative component as of such is basically using a tool that's really familiar to the community. That is using like a lot of capturing the voice of people. So that may be one research difference. As somebody mentioned here today, it works from the bottom up. It's flipping the situation. And in the past, research has been basically like being devised by the researcher. It's been placed on the community or on the participants that people work with. It's basically already been pre-programmed. This comes from more of an organic process that comes from the flax roots or the roots of the community to help to what's the word? It empowers people. It's a process. It's not saying that one's better than the other. This process works well when working with Indigenous people. It's community oriented, so it's like a lot of research, psychological research is either done online now these days, or it's done in the universities. So doing a lot of community-based work it's quite long and arduous, but yet like once you've done it, it actually comes back and it really like benefits the research team and the community. So that would be the difference. To answer your question, Olivia, it's just off the cuff. But I think for me, the differences would be around how the methods that are used, what is important, it comes from the community as opposed to a top-down process and conventional research. Numbers may be used in mixed methods design, may be used, but generally speaking in Indigenous work, qualitative appears to be the big hit at the moment because it's capturing the voice of the people, essentially. And it's one way of really grabbing some people of what's important for them. How does it weave into general psychology? Well, there are a lot of things in Indigenous psychology. There's health issues, there's educational issues, there's factors of environmental issues, there's things around political issues that link into general psychology as well, or general psychology linking into Indigenous psychology.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there are issues with assuming that general psychology applies to everyone, all Indigenous groups?
When we've been taught in a general psychology system of that, hey, we aggregate the data, and we get group data, and we get the group average, and then we try and find and see if there's anything in the mix that's significant or compelling to report. And some of the nuances are missed in regards to looking at what are individual differences or individual strengths that can be gleaned in the material or in the data or in the study. So talking along those lines, that sometimes, when you're trying to record or document the story or the narrative, be it research, it gets lost in translation if we're looking at trying to map what are gross averages for a particular community when it may not be the case. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. I had long-standing discussions around this matter, in regards to, one can be compartmentalised in our empirical system. And the qualitative part is, are we getting longitudinal work from qualitative work, or is it just like a snapshot that's taken at that time? I think both applications and methods that we use have their merits. Using qualitative work as a means of, it can be actually quite liberating for some people, where they feel like they've been heard. Both options work if you understand the mechanics or the ethics behind the use of empiricism to its fullest entity, and the same with qualitative work, that they can work in tandem where they can both express a story and give rise to each other. I mean, when I was training, we had either qualitative or quantitative. It was like poles apart. I only came from the quantitative training. So to see qualitative slowly coming through the, study of psychology has been, uplifting. Something really briefly that came on my radar last year, actually. And it was sort of like, what had been happening was there's a term called mātauranga in the Māori language. And mātou means it's part of a family of words that are embedded around whakamātautau, which means to observe, to analyse, to examine, and to really go into some really great depth of critically understanding a phenomena. And ranga is to weave some of those concepts to make sense from a scientific to a people to an environmental to a spiritual context. And so one way of looking at things in what we call mātauranga Māori is looking at, again, one of the big threads in this talk is around relations. And there's a whole embedded level of what I'm writing up at the moment as we speak as a philosophical piece around holism. And so it was questioned last year and penned by some people from the University of Auckland that it doesn't have a position in science. Now, the question here is, what is science? We get into a philosophical debate here. Whose science is it? Who owns the science? And so what happened here was the credibility around what I mentioned before about mātauranga Māori was at a a crossroads with some people that had penned a letter, not seeing it as having a standpoint or some recognition in a scientific world. And so my question here is, yes, mātauranga Māori and Western research are different, but there are points of convergence. The points of convergence is about creating community, creating the point of like making sure that what we do in research is good for the end users or the audience that we serve. Those are two things that really do like resonate with me. And yes, they do differ. There is a science in mātauranga that maybe we'll have another podcast on that on itself, because it goes, like what I was saying, we're looking at embedded relations. There's not only just the phenomena itself, we're taking in a whole lot of other things to bring it to its full entirety. And the holism part that I'm writing up at the moment is around the fact that they're not discrete units of analysis. The parts are all moving parts that really help to make the bigger picture like hum. Hopefully I'm making some sense out of that at the moment, because I'm still figuring out what I'm writing, because it's philosophical, and if you write philosophically it's quite tautological at times, meaning very circular. So yeah, that's my brief take on things there. I'd really like to, if that's possible, talk a bit more along those lines in some time later.
Oh, most definitely.
Okay,
we could have a complete
series
on it. Like,
I'll change my voice.
Yeah, I feel most of the things discussed so far like could have their own
space,
individual podcasts in space. Like not just your stuff, but even stuff which Matt Hammond spoke about. Even Dr. Hassan came on and was talking about you're owning your own genetic data when she came on. And
yes, so the bioethics is brilliant. Right? Yes, indeed.
So each and everything which we've had so far, we could have multiple podcasts on them, and we're more than happy to have you all back on.
Right.
So with that, should we get on to the final segment where we ask you a few quick-fire questions? You've listened to the podcast, so I know you know what's coming to an extent.
Snapped. Yes, Aid.
Are you ready, Tia? Quick fire?
Sure.
Right, should I do this one?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Summer or winter?
Winter.
Movies or TV series?
TV series.
Okay. If your life were a TV series, what genre would it belong to?
New Zealand. It was New Zealand soaps.
Like Shorten Street.
Perfect. Yes.
It can be the psychology department or the drama.
Indeed.
Cats or dogs?
Cats. Oh, well, that was fast.
Yes, you're the first one to say that so far.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, they've been all canine lovers. Yeah. Boo! I'll have words to my colleagues about that.
What's your cat's name?
My cat's name's Mincy.
Mincy, shout out to Mincy.
Hey, Mitz. Yeah, she's not happy with me. She's been in the cattery for 4 days now, so she's back with me now. But I've got to play cat psychology for at least a day.
Yeah. What's your weapon of choice?
Wine.
Which superpower would you like to have?
To make me come to work. I find a car park straight away at Victoria University of Wellington.
That's actually a very useful.
Very practical.
Very.
You don't care about flying or invisibility, just finding a car park.
Finding a car park at work, yeah. First time, Yeah.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No. Oh, yes, I should have asked. What sort of hot dog are you referring to?
Yeah, we're talking American hot dog, let's say.
Oh, yes, so it is a sandwich, sorry. Yes, yeah.
What is your least favourite type of music?
I was going to say heavy metal, but I quite like some heavy metal. What sort of music don't I like? Oh, probably hymns.
Hymns?
Church hymns.
Oh, yeah. Tia made a yawning face.
We've got video of it as
well. Oh, no! Gosh,
all the Catholic nations in the audience.
You're going to hate on me now. They're just going to go,
What is your favourite food or cuisine?
Oh gosh, how long have we got?
That's a different podcast, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is actually. I like roasts. I like salads. I like stir fries. A particular cuisine, it's probably going to be Vietnamese.
What is the ugliest fruit or vegetable?
Oh gosh, vegetable. Beetroot. Beetroot for vegetable. Yep. First world problems. Sorry.
If you could be any animal, what would it be?
Cat.
Of course. So you can hang out with your cat and
Pretty
talk.
much. Yeah, talk cat.
Yeah.
What is the worst thing you've ever paid money for?
Oh gosh. What's the worst thing I've ever... Actually, it's a dress that I've never worn.
What does the dress look like?
Not very nice. Actually, it's just like a big... It's got a big cow neck and it's sort of like a drop waist. But the drop waist makes me look like I've got a big waist, you know. So it's like silly tear. You don't buy anything after, 7 o'clock at night online on a Friday night. You don't buy anything online.
After a glass of wine.
But yes.
There you go. Life advice for you right there. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Gosh. Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Got me on that one.
Is New Zealand not springing to mind?
Yeah, but there's lots of places in lots of places in New Zealand. Dunedin, that's my hometown, which is our place to go. But there's lots of places in New Zealand I'd really like to live in as well, to have pockets of my life, like Central Otago. Central Otago at a place called Bannockburn. It's lovely. Lake Dunstan has lots of frosts, snow, good wine, good people. Yeah.
What reality TV show would you most like to see made?
Gosh, we've had quite a few, haven't we? Reality TVs, Maybe, I do quite like The Block.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that. That's a reality show, isn't it? I mean, it's like building a house.
Yeah,
and
reality renovation, yep.
yeah.
Would you like to put a Dr. Neha spin on it?
Or it would be like lots of things where they have to find the clues of where to next, what to do next in regards to building the house, having lots of fun with the other contestants, playing pranks, in between the important parts of building the homes. Yeah,
Might take a bit longer,
it
but
might take apple pieing somebody's bed or something like that,
What's legal but still feels illegal?
Speaking Te Reo Māori. We know it's an official language, and yet we predominantly speak a lot of English. So yeah, one of these days, Roger Finch, we may have a society where we can speak Te Reo Māori freely. Kia ora.
Well, historically it wasn't even taught for a long time, wasn't it?
Correct, Zahid, yes. Well, it was banished. And so, yes, the revival of it since early 80s has still been slow, actually, up to maybe a quarter of Māori speakers that are at a very conversational level and, very introductory. And it'd be lovely to see all of us be able to have a conversation here, where we can have lots of laughter and then lots of, work and play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you see the recent thing, council meeting or something, a lot of Pākehā people, and they just introduced themselves in Māori, and there's people shouting at them like, oh.
Yes.
Yes, I remember what that was about.
That was, was that at Tauranga, the Bay of Plenty?
Yeah, might have been.
There was a lot of pushback there where people just went, what the heck? We don't want, and I think to the point where the Māori Party have basically refrained from putting in a candidate and tauranga, apparently. I don't know whether it stands from that, but I do remember what you're talking about. There was a big, big uproar where people just went, no, we're not having none of that, you know.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, hopefully when, it comes, when you guys are, at the forefront, you will be, that, things may, like relations will be much more convivial, amicable.
Hopefully.
Yes, Aid.
All right, last two questions.
Okay.
What type of researcher is the most likely to win a drinking contest, and why is it you?
Oh gosh, if I don't, I mean, it's going to defeat the purpose here, and you too. But if I can sort of stave off drinking for a good part of the night until everybody's totally comatose, then I start drinking. Then that's the way I'm going to win that particular, that contest. Because otherwise, if I start drinking too fast, I'm going to lose.
The very last question we have is, if you had any general piece of advice, life advice or whatever, for us and our listeners, what would that be?
Well, I tell you what, folks, out there in podcast land, why don't you come and check us out in the School of Psychology here at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Remember, we're in the capital, so, there's lots of good food here and lots of good students here. So if you're keen on checking us out, nobody's paid me to do this, just for the records. But if you want to come and see some really good people, you've heard people like Mark, you've heard people like Hedwig and Matt, and today, well, I don't know about today, but people, my colleagues, and of course Olivia and Sahid. So check us out. And what's our website?
Do you mean for the School of Psychology?
Yes.
Ooh. I don't know what it's called, but if you search School of Psychology, VW.
Okay. There you go. You have it firsthand from Victoria. From Olivia.
Yeah. Although the podcast, we must say that none of the views on this show are reflective of Victoria University of Wellington.
Oh no, we're going to get in trouble now.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Thank you so much then, Dr. Neha, for coming on, joining us.
You're welcome.
We'd love to have you on again. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. It was so much fun. To end, we will end with the same whakatoki I read out at the beginning, and then we'll close off with the Waiata. E hara taku toa, I te toa takitahi, Henare Te Owai taki mano. Success is not the work of one, but the work of many. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and thank you, Sahid and Olivia, for taking the time with me. Hopefully that was productive. And also thank you to Matua Albert Tibble for providing the whakatoki to Sahid. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tia.
Thank you.